Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. It is your host, Kaylee here, and you are tuning in to episode number 249. And today I have a really special conversation for you to kind of lean into with me as I have a guest, my esteemed colleague, strategic growth advisor at KLC, Krista Donargo, here to join us. Hello, Krista.
Hello.
I asked you, Krista, to come to join me today for a conversation that we've had a few times offline, something that you've really leaned into teaching and supporting our Academy members with this past year. And I just am at a place, I think part of, you and I are kind of in the throes of navigating the nervous system stabilization that comes with what's happening in LA with the fires right now. And I think
Sure.
just being together and talking about that yesterday and, looking at the forecast for 2025. And last week I delivered a thought or a statement around what I think the predictions of what success will look like for businesses in 2025. And one of those being a real central focus around mental health support for both your clients and how you show up to consumers in the world today, but also to your team. And so there's a really, really powerful topic that I want to talk about with you today, Krista, and that is about psychological safety. So I'm going to ask, I think let's just have a conversation, a square roots, like back to the basics about what psychological safety is, why we need to even be thinking about this as an employer, and what we can do, some really practical things that we can put in place in our business to create a safe place for our employees to work and for our customers to come to visit with us. So I'm really excited to chat with you. I think before we jump into the questions, I would love for you just to introduce yourself for those listeners who are here that don't know you yet or haven't had a chance to work with you personally. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at KLC.
Thanks, Kaylee. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm always so excited to be asked to be a guest on the Fierce Factor podcast. It's an honor. I am a strategic growth advisor at KLC. I have an education and master's in psychoanalysis. So, of course, mental wellness has been something in my world for quite some time now. And, starting this work at KLC, how long has it been now? Almost 2 years. I've really been able to implement so much of that education into a lot of how I coach clients and some of the work that we've done with team and developing culture. Um, and I also have a background in communication. So I have been a communication coach with Fortune 500 and 100 CEOs. So, I think that it's wise of us to also talk about communication when we talk about mental wellness in the workplace and developing team, because I do think at the end of the day, communication is key in developing all of that within culture. So yeah, should I start with just talking about what it is, what
Yeah,
psychological
I
is?
think that's a great place to start. I think that this is a kind of catchy phrase right now.
Yes.
And a lot of people we don't really understand. And I'll be honest, I'm going to be, continuing to learn with you. And I've been, fortunate obviously as an entrepreneur and somebody who's learning as I go how to be a better leader and how to care for my team in the right way. That you've been a source of a wealth of knowledge and a resource for me to lean into. And I think that why don't we start from just square one? Like, what is psychological safety?
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge what you said, which is that we often, and I would say very recently, have been hearing a lot of mental health buzzwords, even in our industry, and psychological safety might be one of them. And I think it's really important to address not just, the theories around it, but actually the practicalities of what can I actually do as a leader to bring this to my workplace and my ecosystem. So I think that's the first thing I want to acknowledge is, yeah, we can talk about it, but let's actually also get down to that nitty gritty of how do we do this. So psychological safety is a feeling, if you will, cultivated and shared by the team that it's okay to take risks. It's okay to express ideas and concerns. to speak up and ask questions and to admit to mistakes. That's a big one. And it's the feeling that it's okay to do all this without the fear of negative consequences.
Mhm.
So it's really kind of like permission to speak candidly, from those employees to leadership.
Mhm. Oh. Okay, so
Yeah.
why is psychological safety important in the workplace?
Okay. So I know that actually might be a scary thing, especially for a lot of owners, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm opening Pandora's box here. Like, what's going to happen? But I think we need to acknowledge how important it is in the workplace to create, we always talk about culture. So I think it's really adds to the culture of our team and our ecosystem. It creates a harmonious workplace. It will reduce employee turnover if you can really cultivate that feeling of safety. It also promotes creativity and ambition in employees. And so often I talk to clients who are asking me, how do I motivate my employees? How do I get them to like get that entrepreneur,
Right.
attitude and energy? And I'm like, well, they have to be encouraged to be creative and take risks, which without feeling like they're going to get in trouble for all of that. And on top of that, if you're an employer who's experienced employees not being forthcoming with mistakes they've made, this is a great way to reduce that and deal with mistakes in a timely manner because your employees are not withholding information. They're coming to you right when the mistake is made, they're admitting to it and they're saying, "Hey, what can I do to make this better?" And I really think that if a value that you hold as a owner or employer is to challenge, is like a value I hear a lot is I want my employees to challenge themselves to grow. Well, I
Mhm.
think that it's important to create that safety so they feel comfortable to push themselves and to possibly
Mhm.
fail.
Yeah, and I do think that like this is so much easier said than done because I too, and you know my shtick, like hire people who will be excited about taking accountability and producing results within their role because they care about what they put their fingerprint on.
Sure.
And yet, at the same time, especially in a small business and many of the businesses we work with that are growing so rapidly, we have to almost have such a tight grip on what everybody is doing and the results that are produced, the level of care, the level of excellence, the consistency, all of the things that happen that sometimes I think we almost become, it's like a double-edged sword and we end up suffocating our own self because we don't, it's hard within that's the scope of like growing and then wanting to make sure things are done perfectly and according to like what we create the system for, that once we sort of let that employee loose to go, we have, now like still responsible for all of the outcomes of what happens, but now we have to allow them to take the idea and potentially make a decision or a mistake that could be very costly for the company that could diminish, a value or like it could taint, reputation or something about the brand that we've created. So it's very scary. So we tend to kind of want to grip tighter. So this is a really it's a hard thing. It's an easy thing to understand and it's a hard thing to implement, Krista. It really is. Like yeah.
No, and I understand that, and I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a fine balance that you're speaking to, which is, and I think that this could be a pitfall, at least that I've experienced as a coach talking to clients. Sometimes we lean too hard in one direction.
Mhm.
So I speak to clients who want to create this great team culture and yeah, create that safety and, inherently they're nurturers, inherently they're givers. So they go really far that way and they go, okay, I just want you to feel safe. And they just give like an incredible amount of space and freedom to their employees. And then they're like, Krista, what do I do? My employee is like taking vacations left and right, walking out to take lunch breaks whenever she wants. And there's just she feels so safe. Like, I don't want her to feel that safe. And I'm like, I totally understand that. And so we can't, what I was, it's funny, it's like this thought like woke me up late at night. I was literally like sleep and I was like, I need to write this down. We talk so much about creating psychological safety, but, and this is to your point, Kaylee, part of that safety is creating structure. And part of that structure also means creating boundaries.
Hmm.
So, like as an employee, and I have to also just say, Kaylee, you might be nervous about this, but you are do such a good job of creating psychological safety. At least I can speak personally for myself. And I don't
No.
even know if it's something inherent or something you're consciously aware of. But I understand within our structure of KLC and the values you hold, I know really what's okay and what's not okay. And within that freedom, within that space, the decisions I make, the freedoms I take, the creativity I put into my projects are still functioning within a structure. And I think that having that structure is also a kindness to your employee that goes along with creating psychological safety. So you can't have one without the other. And I just think, I just want to, because you were kind of starting to talk about that, I just want to say that to me, that's a huge pitfall is creating too much psychological safety and not having that structure in place.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's kind of that like goes back to being really honest with ourselves as leaders about what our expectations are and not shaming ourselves for having those expectations
Right.
because we are holding people to a standard in our brain, whether we communicate it to them or not. And I think it's totally okay. And I talk to so many women who are like, I get triggered by this thing and like I'm so upset that I don't want to be triggered. Like I want my employees to have freedom. I want my employees to have space. I want them to have work-life balance, but also like not at the expense of us not showing up every day and getting the work done. And I think it's okay to feel that. Like I just want to say, to like my colleagues who are running businesses and have those like feelings are kind of stuffing down, allow yourself, love yourself as a leader, allow yourself to have those expectations and to create to verbalize and communicate and honestly put on piece of paper like this is the standard of excellence by which we operate, and for that we call core values, like those are the standards by which we operate and hire and communicate those again and again and again. And I think if you hold people to those standards, then you can give them that space then to like creatively explore and express themselves and their strengths within those types of boundaries within the ecosystem. So let's get a little bit more tactical here. What are 3 ways, Krista, that an employer can create psychological safety for their employees?
Yeah. And I think, talking about this is so important because there are many times that I've taught about psychological safety and I ask clients, I'm like, do you guys feel you have that? And they're like, yep, I have it. And I'm like, it's kind of like this thing that you have or don't have, but what we don't
Yeah.
often realize is that it's an ongoing relationship. It's an ongoing communication. It's like
Practice.
it's a practice.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I just want to like just point that out that psychological safety is not something you have or don't have. It's something
Okay. So I can't go buy it.
you can't go buy it. You can't, you can't hire someone to do it for you. It's something that you have to like cultivate and it takes time and it's going to take a lot of energy. It can take a lot of energy. So let's talk about practical ways. And these might just be jumping off points, it is a
Perfect.
practice, but let's talk about some practical things that you or maybe your practice manager can do, whoever's dealing with team the majority of the time. So one would be that when an employee makes a mistake, and it's going to happen, people are human, let's, as opposed to putting shame on that individual or publicly saying something to them in front of other team members, which will immediately shut someone down and put them on the defensive and make them feel like crap. And they're not going to try anything new now because they're like, I don't want to mess up. Instead of doing that, why don't we use it as an opportunity to learn as a team? So let's
Mhm.
say someone makes a mistake with a type of communication they had with a client and they shouldn't have said something. And maybe it elicited an emotional response from you, as opposed to just immediately jumping on that and being reactive. Let's hold a team meeting. And instead of calling out Emily or whoever did that
Mhm.
mistake, let's talk about how we treat clients. Let's talk about like the overall values we share as a team and use it as a learning opportunity to revisit those values as a team, as
Mhm.
opposed to putting shame on one person. The second thing you can do is encourage your team to ask for help and encourage your team to ask questions if they're unsure, and practice that yourself. Like as a leader, ask someone a question in front of the team if you're not sure what something is or means. Show them that it's okay not to know everything and it's okay to ask for help and support.
Mm.
And the third thing you can do as a leader is to acknowledge your own fallibility. Talk about your own failures. And I know that can be scary when you're trying to uphold an image of power and control and CEO. And we're all learning that. A lot of clients I work with are just learning how to do that. So I think
Mhm.
they kind of hold on to that image tightly and they don't want to look weak. So they don't really share these stories of failure that are actually really inspirational and trust building to employees. They can even be funny, stories about when they totally messed up and really about how they recovered from that failure and what they learned from that. And when the employee hears a leader, someone they look up to, their boss, the CEO of their company, talk about those things, not only does that make that leader look more human and relatable, but it makes the employee feel like, okay, I'm not a total mess up because I made that mistake. Or they're human too, and I know that I'm in a safe environment where people make mistakes and we learn from them moving forward.
Mhm.
So I say those are three very, I don't know how easy they are, but they're three practical things that you could do in the workplace.
Yeah, I love that. So frame the mistake as a learning opportunity, not going straight to it being a problem, but like kind of enrolling the team as like, how can we learn from this? I always think like to going in with curiosity about things.
Mm,
Like, there's a whole different approach with an employee when you're like, why would you do that? Versus tell me what you were thinking. Like
right.
what's like like I'm curious, curious about it's like the tonality, the approach. Um, Going into any situation with curiosity is always going to help you get more information as an employer because you're again allowing that space for them to answer a question versus just being sort of like punished, right? And it also helps you get, I'm always trying to get context. How is my employee's brain working? What is the process, the thought process by which they're thinking? Why are they approaching it that way? So that I can come in and I know what angle to approach to take them. And then a couple other things. Okay, so that was one. Two is to model curiosity, ask questions, encourage, so this practice obviously, and then acknowledge your own failure. So there's a couple things that are coming to mind on this topic stemming from a recent coaching day I had with a client, and so I was sitting with her and her practice manager, and we were kind of just chatting about some growth opportunity in the company, and something was brought up about an employee feeling intimidated almost by their boss. And I don't think this is totally unusual, especially when you have like, think if you're a service-based provider or you have a clinical practice or a coaching practice, right? For us. And then you have other people who are trying to model and mentor what you do. You're already looked at as somebody who's already accomplished and achieved. And so the employee is constantly wanting to impress you, to be like you. They're trying to follow in your footsteps. So I think the showing failure thing, there's telling stories of failure, right? But I also think that there's showing that you're failing forward currently. And that's
Mhm.
something I don't think we do enough as leaders. We look back at, oh, I went through this just like you did, and here's where I am now. Well, you're already on that pedestal. So you're back on the pedestal, like, having gone through that mistake. But also, we know we're making mistakes on a daily basis. We're setting a vision. I was talking with my trainer at the gym yesterday about something that's coming in the next few weeks. I can't wait. But a big project, we're getting ready to launch a KLC. And he was like, I was telling him, like, the business model we built 5 years ago, like everything has changed. And so we have to completely adapt. Well, what do I have to do as a leader, Krista, is I have to build the plan. I have no clue if it's going to work or not. And then I have to show up and get you guys fired up and engaged and like passionate and like excited about it. When in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't freaking know if this is even going to work or not. Then you guys have to take that and translate that into, all the way disseminate it through to our customers and that's how we build this energy of the culture, right? But I think that what we don't do is say, you know what? I thought this was the direction we were going to go. And I'm making decisions on a real time basis. And I made a bad choice, or I'm scared as hell about what's going on here. And I think like that, we don't always even recognize to allow ourselves to share that because we're afraid if we do that it'll show weakness to our team or it'll make them feel like I think sometimes we think subconsciously, like if I say I make a mistake, it almost like allows them to make a mistake. And I think it could actually be a good thing, right? So it's interesting. I'm just kind of playing like devil's advocate with you from like,
Yeah.
the business leader brain.
Absolutely. And I think what you're speaking to is this idea of vulnerability and how we
Yeah.
view it and whether we view it as a weakness, which is sometimes a reframe that, we as leaders have to reframe in our own minds, which is, oh, I have to, and being a like a powerhouse woman in this culture, it's like I need to uphold this certain level of like strength and like I am like a leader, perfect and blah blah blah. But what we don't realize is that like sharing some of that vulnerability is the very thing that builds soldiers in our army. That's the very thing that builds trust between team members. So I think that like to your point exactly, sharing those things are going to make people fight harder for the cause. They're going to make people fight harder for us, which is, counterintuitive to what we think.
I love that. So true. And then the other thing too, I would say is that through these experiences, that's where our policies are built. Because
Mm.
I think like I had a conversation, someone said, what do you do like for an employee handbook? Like when you have policies, do you actually like, I want to know like, what do you really do? Like, do you go use somebody else's as a template? I'm like, well, on paper, you should hire somebody and pay, $10,000 for one. But, you can look at like what policies are, standard. But truthfully, the policies that we've created in our company have all come from like, you know, showing up in a tube top on a Zoom meeting, probably not the best idea looking naked. Like, but we didn't, gotta have to like see it to like
Right,
realize like
right.
okay that's no you know what I mean. So I think like also again to the point of vulnerability, like that's one of ours, like our dress code came out of like seeing what was not really appropriate, right? And so I think like that's where you allow yourself to say I don't have to be perfect. I am imperfect. And I think that if we realize that and we look at the building of our company in that way, we tend to hire better team members for us that are better fit for us because they're cool with that. They're like, I'm cool with the imperfection and I want to be part of the solution to create something really impactful and significant with you.
Yes. And I just want to point out something that you, I think subtly spoke about or alluded to in this story about a tube top on a Zoom call and like how we came up with a employee policy of, covering shoulders. It's this feeling of the way you communicated it was there's a lightness to it. It wasn't like a oh my God, this is bad. You doing this is it's almost like this is kind of silly and funny and none of us knew this was an issue until we saw it. And so it's having that lightness in the communication can really help lessen the blow when you're dealing with employees that might be a little bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
So I think, and a lot of the clients I work with are talking about, and this is something I also want to talk about, but just the employees that are coming into the workforce now from school, they're a little bit more sensitive than we're used to, and
Yeah. I
I think
mean, do
the
you
climate
think
we're in.
Yeah. Why do you think that that's why this topic is so relevant and buzzworthy in today's social climate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that. like mental health in general has become on all social media platforms has become very buzzworthy and trending, if you will. And I think that especially, and I don't want to group a whole generation together, but especially with the younger generations, maybe it's even to their to credit them. Maybe they're just a little bit more emotionally evolved than we are. I don't know. Maybe they have higher emotional EQs than we have, but they're certainly more sensitive and they've certainly been exposed to things that perhaps we haven't been exposed to. So I think a lot about being a leader is understanding what your team needs. And
Mhm.
maybe your team needs something that is a little bit more, I don't want to say touchy-feely, but it's a little bit more conscientious around their emotions and how things are affecting them. And that's why communication is also important in today's, um, I just want to say it's communication goes hand in hand. So you can't really
Mhm.
separate the two. And I truly think it's of the time. It's really what's going on now with younger generations.
Yeah. And I think like rather than feel frustrated about that, that is the reframe to say, I often remind myself that part of my job as a leader in this company is to mentor our team members and teach them things they have not been taught. And I do think that's also a gift. I think that's the gift of leadership, that is our calling, like to not, just hire somebody and crack the whip on them and be like, why aren't you performing? But like also show them exactly what we expect of them and how they can show up in that way. So I kind of want to land the plane here by Krista, like talking about what if for someone listening here, they're like, okay, I get this. I totally understand. I want to adopt it. I realize like I probably haven't been showing enough curiosity and vulnerability and really framing this and making this an intentional conversation in or topic in my business. What are some practical things a business owner or even employee can do today to create psychological safety in their own ecosystem?
Sure. I think a lot of this is going to be around communication. That will be the first thing that the first umbrella theme to this, and that would be hold regular meetings, develop a rapport with your team. I'd go as far as even say take an interest in your team members, ask them about their life and receive that information without judgment. Truly listen to them and just like back to your point about curiosity, get curious about your team. That's going to make them feel cared for, safe, like you're interested. It's going to build trust. So I do think, even as a leader, even if we have a great practice manager, having that involvement with team where we are constantly having conversations, we're constantly keeping our door open. And even if they don't come to us, we go to them and we say, "Hey, I haven't caught up with you in a while. Let's chat. What's going on? How are things going?" And I think just really taking that interest is going to be really important. So here's the other little tip is that it's a lot easier to do this early than it is to reverse something that has already been going very wrong. So trying
Mhm.
to, as soon as you hire an employee, try to cultivate that psychological safety early on. It's a lot easier to build than to reverse because once you break the trust of an employee, or a person, it's a
Mhm.
lot harder to get that back. But again, I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm just saying try to focus in doing this early when someone comes on so you establish the culture early on. And
Mhm.
also to my point about having a practice manager do a lot of the talking, another thing that I've heard a lot from practice managers about is that they are the first touch with the employees and they are not necessarily understanding that the trust has to be built. And so whether you're a practice manager or an owner, this is not something that you can just say, "Hey guys, you can trust me. Hey guys, it's safe to talk to me." This has to be an ongoing practice where you are showing them that the mistakes they made, they're not going to be screamed at and shamed for, or, where they are, modeled the same respect as other employees. You're showing curiosity, you're taking an interest in them. These are all things that practice managers can also do. So having a well-trained practice manager is going to be instrumental in creating psychological safety with team, and really having them understand the value of communication and affirmative communication. And I'd say that's true for everybody, is, try to avoid the no, but blah blah, all that like negative talk. And even if it's something that you can't necessarily, oh, that was my little appointment ding. Okay, I don't know if you heard that, but even if it's not something you can do, like if an employee asks for a raise, I mean, we hear this all the time. Oh God, they asked for a raise and I can't give them any more money. So I tell them, no, you can't have a raise. Because I said, what if we talked about the yes and approach, where it's like, yes, I think it's incredible that you value the work that you do and you're ambitious and you want to make more and you want to make a better life for yourself. And this is how we're going to get there together. And
Yep.
that, framing of talk and communication, which you do really well, Kaylee, I have to say,
I
it
would
does.
say we've had that conversation, haven't
Yeah,
we?
it doesn't deflate you,
Yeah.
and like I think so many employees get deflated and then they
Yeah.
just kind of feel like they're just holding on to their job and they don't want to make the wrong move. So, of course, I went off on a tangent there, but I do think a huge one in the communication umbrella is speak with like affirmations, and don't necessarily shoot someone down just because it's something you don't agree with and can't do as a leader.
Right. I love that. No, I think this is such I think one of these conversations to just sit and digest a little bit and maybe audit yourself and ask these questions of like, even going back to your last interaction or tough conversation with a team member. And I love that you folded in the practice manager piece, because I do think that is one of the most challenging positions to be in. And you and I both spend time with our practice managers in our CAPL mentorship program as well, who are really managing up and down. And it's a special, nuanced and dynamic skill to be able to do that. And I think this is really, really important for anybody in a leadership role, and also as a colleague, also with your team members, and your friends in the practice or whatever, to remember that everybody has their own emotions and thoughts and feelings about things. And I think if we can be a little bit more open to being curious about what drives and motivates people, we can communicate with them in a better way that allows them to feel safe in producing results that establish movement toward the bigger vision, for sure. So, Krista, this has been a wonderful conversation. And for those of you that are listening to this, like, oh, I want to get more of this stuff, please, by all means, send me a DM, or let me know if you like these types of conversations. We'll continue to bring a little bit more of this inside conversation to the podcast. This is stuff that we teach and talk about in our Leadership Academy on a weekly, daily basis. And these are the kind of things that having a community and coaching and advisory support to help you go and have the conversation and then come back and get feedback on how it went. It is a practice. It is okay, I'm doing it this way. I'm thinking of this. This is how we're going to, reframe the meetings. This is how we're going to navigate the next step, and then being able to get support and coaching to refine your approach and polish up your skills as a communicator and leader. That is what we're here to help you with. So, Krista, thank you so much. And I hope that we will continue to have these conversations, and have an amazing day.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.